How do you feel great on vacation? Like really good? Easy. You go to Aruba. You'll spend your time relaxing on cool white sand beaches and floating in healing blue water. You'll immerse yourself in natural wonder and find your center on an island where things move at your speed. You won't just feel great, you'll feel relaxed, renewed, and ready for life. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your trip at Aruba.com.
Hey, it's Austin James. If you're like me, trying to live your best life while living with diabetes, you can relate to worrying if you're doing a good job managing your diabetes. I use the Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor to get real-time glucose readings and see the impact of every meal and activity to make better decisions. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor can help me live life with diabetes on my own terms, and it gives me more time for the things I love, like being a dad and a musician. Now this is progress. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
With Uber Reserve, you can book your Uber ride in advance, 90 days in advance. Perfect for all you forward thinkers and planning gurus. Reserve your Uber ride up to 90 days in advance. Uber Reserve. See Uber app for details.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and I'm your host, Rich Ferraro. We're recording on Sunday the 13th of August, and it will probably be Monday by the time you hear this, but we are here to talk about Nottingham Forest's strong start to the Premier League season, but trouble still seems to dog the club with injuries, FA fines and continued problems with Pogmol. Today's Forest Ramble discussion will cover a huge fine for that tweet. We discuss the ins and outs of the judgment. Man City versus the Premier League. Will the Reds be on the right side of history? Reds versus refs. Have Pogmol got it in for Forest and Nuno? All of this, plus the Forest Ramble sketch and a game of Guess That Red, coming up in this episode of 1865, the original Nottingham Forest podcast established in 2008. Now, let's welcome our guests for this podcast and let me know who is your player of the season so far. So, in alphabetical order, let's go back to school. Let's start off with you, Tom Newton.
Morning. I will go with Nikola Milenkovic because for the fee what we got for him from Fiorentina, what was it, 12 million quid? He's been absolutely brilliant for us. And like I says, it's going to be the bargain of the season in my eyes because he's just shored up that back line, hasn't he? So, yeah, Nikola Milenkovic for me.
Okay, and next in our register is Stephen Topless.
Hello. Yeah, Milenkovic was my first thought as well, but because I can't say him, I'm going to go Ola Aina. I think he's been excellent all season and he's making his transfer fee, which I believe was nothing, look like an absolute bargain. So, yeah, Ola Aina's my choice.
Okay, fabulous. I mean, as you've taken those two, I think I am going to go... You know what? I might just go for Chris Wood. He's proven himself to be indispensable. He's not always as involved in the game as maybe you might be, but that's the life of a centre forward when you're playing with one up front. And certainly, I would just go back to something that I've said before, which is that he is the kind of player. Every single goal he scores is a proper striker's goal. So I'm going to go for Chris Wood. And we'll return to that topic of players and goals of the season a little later on. Now, there is only one place to start, though, and not just because it broke just after we released our Friday 5 news roundup this week. Nottingham Forest have been issued with a whopping £750,000 fine after an independent panel ruled that their tweet, yes, that tweet after the Everton game, was irresponsible and showed a lack of a cool head. Now, the club do intend to appeal, and apparently part of the reason for the hefty punishment was due to the lack of remorse, unwillingness to delete the tweet, and also failure to identify the individuals responsible. Tom, what's your initial reaction to the fine and also to the club's reaction?
Basically, it's cost us a Paul McKenna, hasn't it? So when you put it into, but no, into context, when you put it to, if you compare it to like certain clubs being fined for racism, which is at 30 grand, 15 grand here, etc., it's way, way over the top.
And let me just interrupt you there, Tom, because Forest Review on Twitter, they did point out Carlisle United were fined £7,500 by the FA for racist chanting. Millwall were fined £10,000 for racist chanting in an FA Cup tie against Everton, so a high-profile game. Gillingham have been fined £12,500 by the FA for sexist and racist chanting. Chelsea were fined £460,000 for the exploitation and trafficking of youth players. Now, obviously, there's an element of sliding scales, so it wouldn't be fair to expect Carlisle and Gillingham, and to an extent Millwall, to pay the same fines because their income is less. But £460,000 for Chelsea for exploitation and trafficking of youth players, is that bringing the game into disrepute less than a tweet?
No, obviously it's worse, but I just think with the Premier League that all they're bothered about is the brand, and with that tweet, sometimes you look at it and thinking after the game when we played Everton, you think, well, it's a bit ill-advised, but when you look back at it, the PGMOL have got to look at them thinking, why is it these clubs are criticising us? Why can't they look themselves in the face and thinking we might be the problem, i.e. the referees and the officials and everything? So looking back on it, the more and more I hear about this tweet, I'm kind of with Forest on it, because they're trying to create a stand to actually think we're not going to be soft on this. We're actually going to believe that. I can put it. Yeah, they're basically saying, look, we're going to make a stand here. We don't want to be just going to roll over. They're actually going to fight it and kind of thing. And I'm fair play to the club, because obviously there's no secret that we've been on the back of, and it's not like being biased, we have been on the back of some horrific decisions and everything, and fair play to the club for sticking to what they believe in.
Yeah, and Stephen, so two key points there, I think, raised by Tom. So number one, I certainly agree with Tom that at the time I thought, well, that's a ridiculous thing to tweet. But the more time goes on, the more I'm going, you know what, actually. But then there is the whole thing, and this is something which, let's be honest, I think we all know where the tweet came from. And so the fact that the club haven't shoved a minion under the bus to say, oh yeah, this was me. I think we all know where the tweet came from, and it wasn't just a minion. But then also the same non-minion is the guy who's been quite vocal at times. He doesn't talk publicly that often, does he? But the big guy has been quite vocal in terms of saying, look, when I think things are wrong and when I think Forest are being disadvantaged, he's coming out and saying it. Is that something that we should be encouraging and appreciating?
The more that time passes, the more I think, I think you've got to call this behaviour out. And if Forest are being hard done by, Forest are being repeatedly picked on by PGMOL, the FA, the Premier League, I think you've got to call it out and call it what it is, because this fine is completely out of proportion. We've touched on it with clubs being fined for racist chants and all manner of other horrible things. And the levels of money involved there don't even touch this figure of 750,000. And the Football Association apparently wanted that fine to be over £1 million, which is just ridiculous when compared to fines that have been dished out for other worse behaviours. In football, it was a tweet. And just because PGMOL have had their egos bruised by it, they want to throw the book at Forest. No, I don't think it's on. I think they've got to get the house in order. And it's worth remembering as well, this tweet wasn't off the back of one incident in the whole season. This was off the back of a catalogue of big errors that were going. At one point, it was week after week, there was another error coming along, some kind of refereeing or VAR error. And I've always been somebody who's tried to stay on the side of referees because it's a very difficult job. And I've tried to come at it from sympathy before, but last season was ridiculous. And I think Forest were well within their rights to call it out. And just because people have got their egos bruised, I think that's why this fine is so big, and all power to the club for trying to appeal it, because it's ridiculous and well out of context.
And Tom, on that topic, then, one of the things that was taken into account was what's essentially a victim impact statement by Stuart Atwell, where he was saying that he felt fearful and embarrassed and he felt that his integrity was being called into question. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here, which is to say that Forest had the conversation with Howard Webb saying, we believe that Atwell is a Luton fan and therefore we're not sure he's the right. So they didn't say remove him. They just said, this guy is a Luton fan. Luton are in the same position as we are and the same position as Everton are. So is that something we need to think about in terms of his suitability to be an official in this game? I think that's a perfectly reasonable way of doing it. They didn't issue a diktat saying Atwell needs to be removed. They just said, is this a good idea?
Yeah. If I was Howard Webb, I would have just took him out of the situation, because if anything does happen, nothing comes back onto you. Think, right, I've looked at it. I've looked at, like, it's like doing a risk assessment, isn't it, at work, and finding out, look, this is a greater risk. Let's look at this and take that individual out of it and put somebody else who's got no affiliation to either club. But they basically didn't do anything, and then obviously it's Atwell who's going to get the flack, not Howard Webb. And obviously, I'm not condoning any behaviour like tweets in terms of from fans saying this should happen to Atwell, and sometimes it will go under the bit below the belt kind of thing. But no,
and we all know that being a ref is something, and there is an issue. There is an issue in football with refs getting abuse, and we see that there's many instances where we see that being permeating down to junior levels, Sunday leagues, kids football, where refs are royally abused and fearing for their safety. In this instance, now there's quite a few people on social media pointing out a catalogue of Atwell errors, saying, well, maybe the issue is to do with Atwell's level of competence. And also, I hate to say it, but in the Euros, which was probably one of the less well-refed tournaments we've seen in recent times, but the absolute lowlight of refereeing was when Anthony Taylor and Stuart Atwell were the officials, where there was more decisions wrong in the space of 90 minutes there than there were in the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, and there was a game the other week, wasn't it, Aston Villa against Ipswich, where I can't remember who the Ipswich player was now, but he was on a booking. He caught one of the Aston Villa players, and Atwell looked at it thinking, yes, it is a foul. He was going to take another yellow card out. I'm thinking he's already been booked and didn't. He should have been sent off, and that goes with the level of competence with Atwell. It just controversy just follows him around like wildfire. And don't forget that he was the one who gave the ghost goal between Reading and Watford. If you remember the game at Pride Park in the...
I was wondering when that was going to come up. And the thing is that these things are a long time ago, but also, fans of all clubs have called into doubt the level of competence of certain officials, and those ones who've kind of been promoted to the higher levels of refereeing. Look, let's be honest, everyone makes mistakes. Players make mistakes, managers make mistakes, and we've seen that plenty of times. We just saw it with England the other night against Greece. But when referees make mistakes, they're game changing. And in this case, like you say, would it have been more sensible to take him out of the firing line, like you say, like a risk assessment type process? But actually, you're talking about Atwell, but in that case, actually, does it fall on Howard Webb to say, you know what, this lies with you?
Yeah, of course it doesn't. Another thing is that it just goes to show that the bodies don't feel they are the problem, and they think it's a club mentality. And like I said, it's in hindsight, he should have been struck out from officiating that game, but obviously it didn't happen. Then obviously what happened with the tweet, and obviously the decision what didn't go our way, because there was definitely at least one penalty for us, and nothing was given, kind of thing. And annoying.
Let's just remind ourselves as well that the tweet, the third penalty, the panel did say, yeah, that should have the key match incidents panel. They did say, yeah, that was a clear penalty, and we had that audio being released saying, "Oh no, it's fine, everything's fine," and all of that. So it's just, I don't know.
But the same referee in that game was the one who sent, who had a great say in Gibbs White getting sent off against Brighton the other week, Anthony Taylor.
Well, yeah. And now I'm not going to go as far as suggesting that there's any kind of vendetta against Forest, because frankly, that's main character syndrome. I'm not going to be so arrogant as to suggest, oh, Forest, they're trying to make an example of us. Other fans may have other opinions. But Stephen, I think that there was something in what you said in terms of essentially Hogmole feel a bit butthurt by it. And the fact that in the aftermath of the tweet, there were fans of other clubs that, yeah, sure, there are fans of other clubs going, well, this is arrogant and a stupid thing to tweet, which may or may not be true. But there are also loads of fans of other clubs saying, you know what, we've got a real problem with officiating. And I'm glad that Forest have come out and said this. And there were thousands of people tweeting along those lines. So is it just also that the FA and Pogmol are feeling really, really essentially butthurt by it?
I think it is, and I think Pogmol are just trying to protect one another. It's a bit of a boys' club, and the way that they've handled this situation and previous ones, they're just trying to protect one another. Was it start of last season when Mike Dean said he failed to use VAR in a Premier League game because he wanted to save Anthony Taylor from getting more grief? It's like, well, I'd rather I just do my job properly than you save me from grief, because I'm going to be that means I'm being a better official. And yeah, we it's becoming clear now we have a problem with refereeing in this country. The level isn't up to standard, and all they're doing is wanting to protect one another instead of actually trying to get better at their jobs and trying to officiate games to the highest standard. Because you are looking at it, and it isn't just Forest, other clubs have been on the receiving end of it, but Forest had that catalogue of errors, one after another, particularly last season, where something's got to be done and something has got to change, because the standard is just so poor. And you highlighted the issue at the Euros. Everything was fine and dandy until the English officials took charge of a game, and then it all went to pot. So these aren't coincidences. There's something going on here, and I think PGMOL have got to leave their egos at the door a little bit, hold their hands up and say, you know what, we probably are making mistakes and we need to get better. And that comes back to Howard Webb.
Yeah, Mike Dean being the first celebrity ref, and that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, is actually to be a ref, you've got to have courage of your convictions, but you also can't have an ego, I guess. Tom, what do you want to add?
Yeah, it's one of the things what I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, months, is that if there's like a junior referee, let's say, and they've got like a more superior referee like an Anthony Taylor, it seems that, right, if he's seen that, I must be wrong, he must be right. And sometimes it's usually the referee the fourth official who's 9 times out of 10 wrong. Whereas like with Rob Jones against Brighton, if that was on the other side of the pitch, that is not a sending off. It was like Brighton will get the throw because it was in front of their dugout and Anthony Taylor's there. Gibbs White has to sit out for a match. It's just things like that.
Although it was Rob Jones, so who knows? I mean, and I did think it was interesting that the key match incidents panel did say actually that they voted 3-2 that it wasn't a yellow card. I actually thought it was a pretty clear yellow card, but the way in which that came about was the issue, wasn't it? So, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of mess going on there. We ran a poll on Twitter asking you whether you think the punishment was ridiculous, harsh but fair, or reasonable. Now, 1.6% said reasonable, so I think we found the Derby fans who are following our account. 10.6% said harsh but fair, and 87.8% said it was ridiculous. Now, I'm just going to throw it out there that I think that suggestion that it's ridiculous, Stephen, isn't so much to do with the punishment itself but to do with the scale of the punishment. Because as Tom mentioned, and as you've mentioned, it's an unprecedented scale of fine. It is the kind of thing that, I mean, I don't know how these things work in terms of accounting. It's the kind of thing that could tip you over PSR limits again, isn't it?
Yeah, funny that, isn't it, when it's Forest involved? But no, I'm not going to go down that conspiracy
Steady
route.
on.
But yeah, again, £750,000 is a significant amount of money, and that could potentially, on a balance sheet, have quite a significant effect. And it all comes back to proportion. It was a tweet sent out in the heat of the moment. Yes, it was probably poorly judged on reflection, but there was some grounding behind it, and it was as a result of cumulative events that happened over a significant period of time. But yeah, when clubs are getting fined £12,000 for racist chanting, homophobic chanting, you've got a club that's been fined for trafficking players, and it's less than what Forest have been fined for sending out a tweet. It's ridiculous. It really is. There's got to be more proportion involved here, and actually people looking a bit more at the bigger picture.
Tom?
And clubs got fined £3 million for wanting to join the Super League. So
Wow.
it just goes to show, doesn't it, where they aligned in terms of punishment and fines, etc.
Well, so yeah, I mean that the debate about Pogmol and refereeing will rumble on, but Tom, you've neatly segued into the next thing we're going to talk about. So I think it's fair to say that the big man is clearly furious about the treatment of the club since promotion to the Premier League. And another big topic that has come up in the last few days is the Man City versus Premier League court case. The 115 charges, and I'm going to be honest, okay, this isn't not just something that affects Forest, but it's something that affects football as a whole. And I say, in terms of being honest, I'm really not sure where this is going. And I'm also really not sure what to think about it because it's almost like it's so big that I cannot compute it. So some clubs are dead against City and have written to the authorities to say, actually, we are against the thing that they're talking about. Some clubs, including Forest, are believed to be sympathetic to them. So let's just talk about what this judgment is. So it's to do with the rules about what we call APT, so they're commercial deals involving clubs and companies to which they have close ties. The restrictions on these things were introduced after Newcastle had their takeover by the Saudi-led consortium, and it's essentially, so it's called associated party transaction. And of course, amongst other things, Newcastle, Man City, who are backed by the Abu Dhabi consortium, and thinking about the fact that where does the money come from? Is that fair? And as I say, there's some clubs who are writing in support of the rules, notably the kind of middle to lower end clubs in the Premier League: Brentford, Bournemouth, Fulham, Wolves. Other witnesses included Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, Brighton, West Ham. And what this suggests, so the Premier League are saying that City brought a wholesale challenge to the APT rules and were unsuccessful in the majority of their challenge. The tribunal deemed that rules were necessary, and if prices above fair market value were paid, then competition will be distorted. City say they won in two key areas where it said that the Premier League, quote, were found to have abused their dominant position and that the APT rules were found to be unlawful. Now, Stephen, this is a big topic. I'm going to just ask you, what on earth do we make of this? How do we how do we make head or tail of this, and how can it affect Forest and other clubs who are not members of the Big Six?
Well, it again paints this picture of unfairness in the Premier League, and if you're not in that Big Six, you're always going to be discriminated against. You look at this challenge from City and what they're trying to do. It's a symptom of allowing member states and national countries to buy up football clubs, and it's a symptom of what the Premier League has allowed to happen over the last 20 years. The influx of money brings power, money brings with it certain individuals who probably think that they are not accountable to the governing bodies. Whether you think those governing bodies are up to scratch is another matter, but still,
Now, you mentioned
that lack of accountability there as well.
You mentioned about the Super League, breakaway thing and the fines that were issued. I mean, is this essentially a way that some clubs are having of trying to kind of say, well, look, we're going to do what we want anyway?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, and they know, Man City, for example, know that if the Premier League tried to take them on with a legal challenge, the Premier League would fail because City would just blow them out of the water, pay for the best lawyers in the world to come in and fight the case for them, and the Premier League wouldn't stand a chance. And once that happens, the Premier League knows that it's powerless against this kind of thing. So, and clubs from nation states, it's that much now of, I think, that much of a problem that the money and the power is allowed to infiltrate into football, that the Premier League is backing itself into a corner. And I can understand up to a point Forest siding with the City challenge, because Marinakis wants to be competitive. He wants Forest to be able to spend as much money and be as competitive as possible. That's all well and good. But then it tips into a moral and a competition issue. And that's where I'm uneasy with siding with City, because I think rules and integrity in football are still important. And we're in danger of losing that if we just allow clubs to run roughshod over it.
So what you're saying is that as long as any investment by owners is within a certain limit and is proportionate to maybe what the club's income would be otherwise. Now, obviously, there is an issue there, Tom, of does this mean that, I mean, for example, should Mr. Marinakis be allowed to put more money into Forest because they are limited in other ways? For example, having a smaller ground capacity and technically a smaller fan base than Man City.
Well, I listened to Talk Sport, and Simon Georgian's been basically saying all this PSR. There needs to be a regulation on the financial rules, but then you can't basically turn down. You're stopping capitalism in football, aren't you? And I've always been of the opinion of this, that over like a 3-year period, that a owner can then invest money into the club, but he obviously signs it off as his own money, so the club's not straddled with the debt. You can do whatever you want with that money, but it's only on a 3-year cycle. But then, having said that, we'll probably be in a position where Marinakis will be able to put, I don't know, say £500 million into the club over the next 3 years, but a Brentford or team like that might not have that opportunity. So, yeah, there's got to be regulations regarding the financial gains in the Premier League, but then you can't stop investment coming in, because basically it'd just be the top 6 getting all the prizes, and obviously that just stops the competitive element of the Premier League. So there's got to be some fairness in it, but then you got to look at it both ways, where there's got to be rules in place. So like a Man City can't like get the best players in all the time kind of thing, but then obviously you got to make the Premier League competitive, because if one loses its competitive edge, the Premier League as a product, it's done, because obviously you're not going to be able to sell it, because it's going to be the same teams all the time winning the leagues and the cups and everything. So yeah, it's way above my pay grade to actually come out with a perfect solution, but something needs to happen. But then obviously you can't stop the likes of us from, if we want to spend money, you can't do that. So there's got to be like some fairness with it. How you do that, I don't know. I'm not that person to come up with the perfect solution.
As I said, it's a big topic, and we're really happy to be joined by Adam, our statman and our women's football correspondent. But also, Adam, you are a football fan first and foremost, and this, I don't know, there's a bit of me that's thinking no matter what the outcome of these cases and these judgments, it's still going to be the case that the Big Six can more or less Because if there's a fair market valuation and Forest's fair market valuation is going to be less than Arsenal or Man United or Liverpool, so therefore that limits the amount that Marinakis can put in. On the other hand, if you keep the rules with regard to the way they are, then it means that Newcastle and Man City, as clubs owned by nation states, can just spend whatever they want. So, where do you stand on this topic, Adam? It is a big one.
I think it comes down to that there's not an easy response, is there? There's not an easy sort of, oh well, let's just, because PSR hasn't worked, financial fair play didn't really work, and realistically, City have broke numbers of rules and they won't get punished for it because they're Man City and they're a massive global entity to the Premier League and they make the Premier League a lot of money. So I think it will essentially continue to be the top six clubs can do whatever they like. And then everybody else has to abide by the rules that contradict themselves and don't make sense. And then that's the situation we find ourselves in. To combat it, you'd have to change a lot of the way that the football pyramid works. That's where it gets difficult, because if you take for example, like other sports, for example, like the NFL or something, there are good teams that stay good, but that's because they have good coaching or whatever. But they get new players every year from a internalized system where the worst teams get better players and the best teams get worse players. So that's how they combat stuff like this. Whereas in football, realistically, if Man City this summer want to go and spend £1 billion, they'll do it because they won't get punished. And if Man City got a 9-point deduction, they'd probably still win the league. So there's no punishment there, is there, for these big clubs spending loads of money? So I think for someone like Forest, if we ever want to break into the top six, it's going to be really difficult, because if we do something like Man City have done, we are going to get punished. So where that fine line is, I don't really know.
Well, and as we've already discussed, Forest do get punished frequently, it seems. Tom?
There's a couple of things regarding the NFL. What Adam's just mentioned is that I've just got like a fear that the more and more American-backed ownership, I think I've counted it, I think it's about 11 at the moment, and it soon be 12 with, that John Texer buying Everton, is that once they get that vote up, the Premier League might turn into the NFL where there's no promotion or relegation. And that's what my ultimate fear is. And then if that's the vote, then it's one of those. I think there's not many teams now who haven't got American ownership. I think there's us, obviously Man City, and you've got Wolves with Fosun, who are Chinese backed, but I think the majority of them now are American backed, and I just think that over the next few years that might be another soundbite to come out of these Premier League meetings, where they're trying to get the Premier League to be a closed shop, as like the NFL. And I think if that happens, I think football in this country is done, because it's like, well, what's the point of the Premier League if it's just going to be like the NFL, which the NFL is obviously great for America kind of thing, and that's become like a global brand. But English football, like with the EFL and everything, that is like the foundation of the game in this country. And once you like stop promotion from that into the Premier League, the games, I think the game's going that way in terms of that.
The game's gone, lads.
Yes, and I just think over the next few years, as more power and money come into the game, and you got obviously clubs manipulating the Premier League with rules and things like that. I mean,
ultimately, money talks, and actually, that idea about the player draft that Adam mentioned earlier is a really interesting one, and one we might come back to. But as we've discussed a really big pair of topics, and we've basically had football's version of the moral maze, I think it's time to lighten things up a little bit. So we'll be back in a minute or two with a mention of Forest new facilities, some more thoughts from you, the listeners, and also let's talk about on-pitch matters. But first of all, it's time for this.
The 1865 Sketch by Jeremy Davies. It isn't normally the role of these sketches to make accurate predictions. When the pod does produce an accurate forecast, it tends to be from other contributors with their fingers rather closer to the pulse of the club than myself. So it was nice, after drawing comparisons between Nuno and Keir Starmer in pre-season, to be validated last week when the Prime Minister took a leaf out of Nuno's book by appointing a Chief of Staff called Morgan. Although it is yet to be revealed whether Morgan McSweeney will be given ultimate power with control of access to the number 10 coffee machine. It's said of some players that you only realise how important they are to the team when they're not there. This definitely doesn't apply to Morgan Gibbs-White. We all knew how important he was to Forest before he was forced to sit out the Fulham game with suspension, but it certainly underlined the fact. The red card against Brighton that was the cause of that suspension has been much debated, from TikTok and Twitter to the BBC. Speaking on Football Focus, Dion Dublin said it was a great tackle, but I was somewhat surprised that they didn't feel the need to get somebody else on with the opposite point of view. What happened to BBC Balance? But I guess their go-to guy for issues of balance, who seems to be Nigel Farage, didn't see the incident. The controversy surrounding the sending off prompted the usual laments that the game's gone, something people have been complaining about for years. If the game has finally actually gone, it's been a very protracted departure, on a par with that cruise ship that couldn't get out of Belfast. They were probably complaining that the game had gone even in the days when Ron Chopper Harris and Norman Bites Your Legs Hunter were putting in reducers at Stamford Bridge and Ellen Road, respectively. They don't make nicknames like that anymore. Norman admires your legs from a respectful distance before jockeying you away from goal, Hunter just doesn't have the same ring. If the game really has gone, then the question is where? Considering Premier League ownership trends, the answer is probably Wall Street, or possibly the Middle East. Certainly at the time when the World Cup went to the USA in 1994, the game was widely seen to have gone, with the American razzmatazz about as far from a wet Wednesday night in Stoke as it was possible to get. Indeed, the lines between show business and sport blurred so much that the opening ceremony actually provided some good old-fashioned Hollywood signposting towards the tournament's final scene, as Diana Ross missed from the penalty spot. Former custodian of the wheel at Manchester United, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, put his own spin on the debate when he complained that the game had absolutely gone after a contentious VAR decision. But this raises the question of how far gone it was before, say when Diana Ross was blasting her penalty towards the corner flag. If it wasn't absolutely gone, as Ole himself was soon afterwards, was it slightly gone or mostly gone? Is this like the glass half empty, glass half full debate? Although, rather than being dependent on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, I suspect the answer rather depends on whether the VAR decision has gone for you or against. Neither Morgan nor Nuno commented on whether the game had gone in the wake of their red cards against Brighton. Myself, I'm not too fussed if it has, just as long as our star man and our star manager don't go anywhere themselves.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. And as usual, just a quick mention to our podcast partners, Sports Social Network, who bring this to your ears, and also FanHub. If you follow us on social media, you'll have seen our team predictions on match days. And if you register as a Forest fan on the app, you can gain rewards such as Greg's vouchers and merch discounts. And you can also stay in touch with your fellow Reds fans. Use our golden ticket 186-ERG and you can skip the waiting list. All of our links are at 1865.football. Now, we put out a few questions on Twitter and we've already had the debate a little bit about player of the season so far. And it turns out, fans, that you agree with us because Nikola Milenkovic has got a resounding 83.2% of your vote as player of the season so far. Chris Wood came in second with 10.9, so that shows the gap. There were a few people stating Elliot Anderson and also a vote for Ryan Yates, despite the fact he hasn't actually started every game this season. Now, Adam, we didn't hear from you earlier on. What are your thoughts on player of the season and why is it Nikola Milenkovic?
It's undisputable. I mean, he's he's stepped in and been. I might be over the top saying this. I genuinely think one of the best, at least statistically, but centre backs in the Premier League this season. He has been that good. And last season, if you had said that we would get a partner to Murillo that would play better than Murillo, I think every single person would have laughed at you for that, for saying
And to
that.
do
So,
it for £12 million.
yeah, I mean, it's an absolute bargain. And the thing is with Milenkovic as well, a couple of years ago, I remember writing something for a Man U podcast, because they were linked with him. And even then, a few years back when he was a bit younger and he was like a up and coming star, he had everything that you want him to do. He wins absolutely every aerial duel. You very rarely see him get beat 1-on-1. And I thought he'd be a good fit for Man U 2-3 years ago. God, I bet I wish with the issues that they're having and some of the other big clubs are having, I bet they looked at Milenkovic in the summer and thought, we'll let him go to Forest, see how he gets on. I would wager to think that Forest would want more than £12 million for him now if he was to leave Forest.
So a couple of things. Number one is that I think that he's probably quite glad he didn't go to Man United and he's come to Forest. And then secondly, there was, and this is almost certainly paper talk rather than thing concrete, talk that Newcastle, who of course are famously in the hunt for a centre-half, are interested. But, there's some talk about, well, his value must have at least quadrupled. Tom, you had your hand up there.
Yeah, with Milenkovic, he's got to be one of the fairest defenders I've seen in a long while. I don't think he's given away a foul this season, and I don't know if he's been bulked, but he's so clean of winning the ball. And it's like, when you get some centre halves who are like going in for slide challenges, he hardly ever goes in for a slide challenge. It's always like standing tackle and everything. He's very fair, and obviously he started the move for Hudson-Odoi's goal against Liverpool, and I think he's. The 12 million quid is an absolute snip, which I mentioned at the start of the show. But it's been absolutely brilliant for us.
Yeah. And Stephen?
It's the effect he's having on everyone around him as well, which is key. I've said it a few times now. I think Murillo's a better centre-half this season because he's got Milenkovic next to him. The back four just looks a lot more solid.
And calm.
Yeah. And that's been reflected in some of our results this season.
And I mean, Tom, you're absolutely right. I think he's given away 3 fouls all season. For a centre half, that's astonishing.
Especially in this day and age.
Yeah, he wins the aerial battles. When he gets the ball, he doesn't panic and he kind of passes it out, as epitomised by that goal at Anfield. And also, he's only just turned 27 and is the captain of his country. And there's so much there that's positive. And we know he's on big wages, and that's why Fiorentina let him go. But the other comment, I mean, that I heard, well, let's put it this way. He's on reportedly on the same wages as Divock Origi. So make of that what you will. But the other comment that I heard is apparently, and I've not seen this verified, apparently he said, I've played Partizan versus Red Star. Going to Anfield holds no fear for me. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what a warrior. He's an absolute warrior, but he's a gentle giant. If you ever heard him speak, he's so softly spoken. But Yatesy was saying about what a leader he is. And certainly with Morgan, if Morgan is out for more than a couple of games, it wouldn't be a surprise to see Milenkovic take the captain's armband if Yatesy isn't on the pitch, because he is that good. So, yeah. Also, we mentioned that goal about over at Anfield, and this takes us to our next question, which was goal of the season so far. So, fans, you said 84% Callum Hudson-Odoi versus Liverpool. Jota versus Newcastle was 9%. Sosa versus Brighton was 6%. Now, those of you who heard our Brighton match report, you'll know that I actually would have chosen Sosa versus Brighton because it had everything that I love. It had challenges, it had passes through, it had a ball down the channels, it had runs between the lines, and then just that little pass by Jota, unselfish, to set up Sosa, and it was done at 100 miles an hour. So I would have chosen that one. But Stephen, which of those would you have gone for?
Oh, for me, it's Hudson-Odoi's goal. Not just the quality of the goal, but what it meant to be the winning goal at Anfield and the first one for Forest for 55 years was very special. But the way the move was put together, the way it started, the ball moved through the team quickly up the pitch, that ball from Elanga, which was fantastic to get Hudson-Odoi the ball, and then he jinks inside and he finds that precise finish, which he's so good at from those angles. Yeah, for me, that will be that. It's already goal of the season. I think it's going to be hard to top it.
Adam, do you agree or disagree with Stephen?
I think it's definitely Hudson-Odoi against Liverpool. I don't really think there's another shout. But for mine, so mine personally definitely isn't the best goal of the season, but I just really like it. Gibbs White's goal against Southampton, purely just because I absolutely love those sort of get the ball in the box and see the madness that ensues and somebody pokes it in. So, yeah, I personally love Gibbs White's goal against Southampton, but it probably is Hudson-Odoi against Liverpool.
Yeah. Tom, any advance on that?
Hudson-Odoi will win it hands down for me because of all the connotations what entailed from it in terms of how long it took to get a win at Anfield. But another goal what I did like was Jota Silva's against Newcastle in the Cup. I know it wasn't a league game, but the one where he's absolutely cracked it enough was at the bar and then it hit the stanchion and it didn't hit the net.
Always looks good when it hits the woodwork on its way in. And also, I think the angle at which he hit it, and you just thought, if you're playing at the park, you get those in one time out of 10. And so maybe Jota was lucky with that. Maybe the other 9 times, even for him, it would have ended up going into the stand. But yeah, and so that's why I put that in the list. But yeah, I mean, I think we all agree that the symbolic nature of Hudson-Odoi's goal means that it's going to win goal of the season, isn't it? I think that competition is over with. Let's move on to the last question, which is what position will Forest finish this season? 46% of you have said 7th to 12th, and 54% of you agree with me, which is that I think we've possibly overachieved so far this season. So 13th to 17th still seems to be the realistic option. But Tom, give me reasons why that's right or wrong.
I'm going to go, I mentioned 14th, I think, at the start of the season. I'm going to go anywhere between 12th and 10th. With the form what Chelsea are in, we've got 3 of the hardest away games potentially this season: Liverpool, Brighton, and Chelsea out of the way, and we haven't lost any of them. So it just puts us in a good mind frame of that we shouldn't fear going to any ground away from home this season. So I reckon, 10th, 12th. I think that'd be an absolute unbelievable season for us. Because if you remember when we was doing these match reports a couple of years ago, the kit man used to get all the boots, all the kit, and the red carpet. Every time we left an NG postcode, it was rolling out the red carpet. We don't take that anymore, and we are hard to play against away from home. And we've cracked it away from home in my eyes. We just need to obviously polish it up a bit at home and sort out certain. Because I think when we go home, I think we automatically first mindset is defend kind of thing, and then obviously go from there. But I think we just got to be a bit more on the front foot more at home, and when we do get the chance of putting teams away, we've got to start doing that. Because I wouldn't say it's a problem at the moment, but it's got the potential of being a problem with our home form at the moment. And the next month or so with these 3 home games in quick succession, I think that's going to be key for our season to finish in my predicted position of anywhere between 10th and 12th.
Stephen, we're not going to finish in the top half unless we sort out the home form, though, are we?
No, that's it. It's great that we're a lot better away from home now, but it seems to have come at a cost in terms of home form, where teams came to the City Ground and couldn't get anything. But you've seen this season, Fulham have won, Bournemouth have got something, Wolves have got something. All 3 of those games you felt Forest could and probably should have won. Not so much Fulham in terms of performance, but in terms of level of team and the ability of both sides. So yeah, if we can just get that home form back a bit, then that's what's going to take us into the top 10. Because if this away form carries on all season, it gives us a really good platform.
And Carabao next year.
Yeah, well, yeah. Adam, will the judgment about Forest and the fine for that tweet, will that galvanise the home atmosphere and galvanise the players a bit? I mean, I can certainly imagine the Premier League anthem being roundly booed once again on Monday night against Palace.
It's so funny, isn't it? Because the Forest fans, and rightly so, I'm in this boat as well, are so against the Premier League and so against what the Premier League stands for and the way that the Premier League punishes teams, etc. So I think, It should, and if it'd be Monday night under the lights against a struggling Palace side, because they are struggling. Let's be right. I'd like to have it on public record that I'd like to apologise to Nuno, because I said that Oliver Glasner was the better appointment.
You know
and I
what?
was
You
wrong.
don't have. You've mentioned this before, and we're not going to hold it against you. I still think that you and I agree that Glasner is a great boss, but
Yeah,
Nuno's really stepped it up, hasn't he?
yeah, for sure. But I think it should. I mean, the home form needs to be better. See, the thing is, for me, is that good teams that do well in leagues are good defensively. And I think, hand on heart, we are one of the best. I think we're on the top 5, top 7 defensive sides in the league. Last season, actually, most metrics had us as a really good defense other than set pieces. Whereas this year, we are a really good defense again, but we don't concede as many from set pieces. And most games that we concede goals, we're probably conceding 1, 2 max, rather than shipping 3 goals or 4 goals or whatever it might be. So I'm more on the optimistic side. I think we will finish 9th or 10th. Because I don't see why we won't. I think we're better defensively than a lot of teams that have been up there, like your Brightons, for example. We're a better defensive team than Brighton are. And I think that a lot of those teams that are going for that in and out sort of top 10 position aren't as good defensively as us. And we do have the ability to score goals. It's just we get Morgan back in the side. We continue the way we are defensively. There's no reason we shouldn't be in the top 10.
And just before I come to you, Tom, Stephen, you didn't mention what your own personal prediction is, so give us an idea.
I think 10th.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
right
So
in the middle.
you're all way more optimistic than me. Tom.
Yeah, going back to partnerships, and it's the old adage, isn't it? Good sides are built on great defences. Cloughy used to preach that back in the day. And I think apart from the Bournemouth game at the opening day of the season, Murillo and Milenkovic have played every single minute. And look how we've performed. Then you look at Man U with all their problems. Ten Hag keeps chopping his and changing his centre halves, so like every game kind of thing. And he's been chopping them and changing them within the game kind of thing. And look where they are and all the problems they've got. So we look a lot settled. And like we've said earlier, is that Milenkovic has galvanised that back four, and they've got the confidence thinking, where everybody is. Because the last couple of seasons, it's like every other game, it's like Wowell might play there, McKenna might play there, Bolly, Niakate, and it was like Felipe, and it just got to a point where nobody knew what the real jobs, and we looked all over the place.
Part of that obviously is down to injuries, but part of also having that settled approach hopefully means that apart from the occasional impact injury or the occasional twist or sprain like Morgan's had, actually having a settled approach also reduces the amount of injuries. It's time to move on, though, and we haven't got time to talk about the club unveiling a slick film showcasing developments at the training ground. We'll cover that in Friday 5 later this week. The other thing I just want to very quickly talk about is discipline. We've touched upon Morgan's red card. We've touched upon obviously, Ward-Prowse he didn't take 1 for the team, he took 2 for the team. But Nuno has frequently been getting in trouble with referees, rightly or wrongly. Stephen, I'm just going to come back to you on this one to start off with. Are Forest basically a marked club in the eyes of FA and Pogmol, or is it actually something whereby you start it at home and they need to improve their own discipline?
Yeah, I think we probably do need to improve our own discipline. Our management team, they know the score. They're experienced people, so they know what's going to happen if they get verbally involved with referees, if they get involved with tussles. Of course, you're going to have your cards marked. I do think the club does have a bit of a reputation now, and I think that perhaps does go against us a little bit. Past incidents that haven't been forgotten by PGMOL probably do come out in instances with fines and suspensions, that kind of thing. You look at the incident at Chelsea, that wasn't started by Forest players, that was all Chelsea players kicking off and throwing the toys out the pram, so to speak. So but I think Forest, they've got to just take the high ground with it and just be the better people and just try not react in those situations. Just play smart. Don't give the authorities any reason to come back and hit you with punishments.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit like if for those of us who drive, if you've got someone tailgating you, you can either get narky about it or you can just, you know what, you do what you got to do. I'm going to let you get on with it. And if you tie yourself up in knots or end up smeared across the road, then that's down to you. Tom, let's just very, very briefly. We're not going to talk about the Morato versus Nicholas Jackson thing. Again, we'll cover that in Friday 5. But with that brawl, I think there's a pretty good argument to be said that Forest are really unlucky to be charged in the first place because it was all Chelsea, wasn't it?
Yeah, if you see on the film is that Cucurella commits a foul, then obviously Nico's given him a nudge. He's took out Maresca, then they've all kicked off, kind of thing. And it's that thing. Arnie Slot's mentioned it recently. Is that they expect to get something, these like Chelsea's and Liverpool's, and they expect like little Nottingham Forest to turn up and lay the red carpet out and just lie down, kind of thing.
It's quite funny the way that Forest got under Arne Slot's skin, though. It really was. Anyway, that's another matter entirely.
Yeah. So yeah, this, like you say, it's all on Chelsea's doing. Really, they expected with their like.
But we'll get fined £1 million, and Chelsea will get fined like 50,000. I'm sure.
Yeah. But if Chelsea were behaving like that, the media would paint it and say, well, they're just being street smart. They're just being savvy. When Forest try those tactics, you know, we're football terrorists, and how dare we try and turn up and make life.
I think we've just come up with the name of this month's pod. Okay. And Adam, just coming back to that thing about should we be doing better? Nuno's absolutely lost his. Frankly, he's lost his shit with referees 2 or 3 times, and that's resulted in him getting red and yellow cards. He should probably be setting a better example, shouldn't he?
You know what? Yes, right, he should be. But also, can you not, I mean, is it on a human level? Your job depends on the ability of somebody else doing their job well. Can you not understand? And I think most people would understand why you'd be frustrated and why these decisions would, you know, irk him, because we can't keep going on with silly red cards or silly. Don't get me wrong, the Ward-Prowse one. No one is arguing it wasn't a red card. It absolutely was a second
genius.
Yellow. It was, but it's. I love that caused another debate, didn't it? Oh, you know, should he have done it? Should he?
He's got a split second to decide what to do, and he's took one for the team. Nicholas Jackson might have run in, and it's 2-1, and
Jackson's fast. I mean, in fairness, you give Jackson time and space, and he probably would end up spamming it into Rosette. But Ward-Prowse couldn't take that chance, could he?
No, but I think going back onto Nuno, yeah, okay, maybe he should be setting a better example, but you could look at it a different way and say, actually, the fire that he shows on the touchline, it does actually go through the team. You know, you're watching a team that cares. You're watching a team that will put their body on the line, that plays for the badge and all that. That all comes from the manager. And yeah, okay, it's not ideal when he gets sent off. It's not ideal when he's not in the stands and all that sort of stuff. But I actually wouldn't want him to change the way he is. I kind of like the fire that he shows, because it shows me and it shows every other person in the stadium watching that he cares.
Yeah. And the upcoming news is that the FA are going to fine Nuno £1 million and stop him from buying Christmas presents for his family this year. Let's move on, because it's time for this.
1865. Guess that red.
Yes, it's our monthly quiz, Guess That Red. I'm not going to stand on ceremony. Let's hand over to Quizmaster Tom. But as always, listeners, do play along at home, won't you?
So today we're going to return back to starting 11. 3 of you will pick or take it in terms of picking the side of, players from a particular game. And seeing we're playing Crystal Palace next, the game in question is 2nd of January 1995, where we was both in the Premier League. So all it is that if pick a player who started, if he didn't start, etc., you're basically out the game. So it's basically last man standing. So I will go alphabetically on my screen, and I will go. Adam can have first pick. So
I'm just going to point out here that Adam wasn't even born when this happened, and you should have seen the look on his face when Tom said, "Yeah, it was from 1995."
Yeah, so I gave him 24 hours to actually look at Premier League players of that era. So I have given him a bit of a nudge,
it's over to you, big man.
So
I mean, I feel that is a bit unfair, picking a day where I wasn't even born.
So,
you know, but I don't know.
You know the era.
Stuart Pearce.
There you go, Stuart Pearce. Yes, he did play. So
lovely.
Rich, you'll go.
I'm going to go for Gary Bull.
Yes, and he scored in that game as well.
His one and only.
Yes. So, Stephen, you'll go.
I'm going to go for Colin Cooper.
Colin Cooper did not play.
No.
So no, he didn't play, and he wasn't even on the bench. So you're out. So it's down to Rich and Adam. So Adam, you'll go.
Stephen, I actually lasted longer than you in a game that from a team from 1995. Just to let you know. Oh God, Brian Roy.
Yes, he did play. You're on a roll. So Rich, you'll go.
I will go for Ian Wone.
Yes. So Adam, you'll go.
God. Lars Bohemian. I'd never say his last name very well.
No, he didn't play, unfortunately. So for the win, Rich.
I am going to go for Scott Gemmell.
Yes, you are the winner. So just to recap, both sides, Mark Crosley in goal, Des Little, Alfie Haaland, Stuart Pearce, Steve Chettle, Vance Warner, Scott Gemmell, Steve Stone.
Vance Warner was going to be my joker in the pack. My main memory of that, I think it might even have been his debut as a starting debut, but my main memory of that is he hit the ball over the bridge for Dendo and clearing it.
Oh, wow. And he nearly gave a penalty because I did watch it on YouTube the other day. Ian Wone, Gary Bull and Brian Roy and Paul McGregor come on for Scott Gemmell then.
Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate your putting together that quiz. And normally what we do is we have the winner choosing the closing music, but we did come to a consensus that we've already chosen what today's closing music is today, and it is courtesy of Nottingham Forest on Twitter, with a little bit of a nod to a Garibaldi Bard. And if you're on Twitter and you haven't checked out Garibaldi Bard, please do, because they are putting together some really amusing content and coming up with some songs for our players. All that's left is to say thank you to Tom, Stephen and Adam, along with Jeremy, for their contributions to today's podcast. Also, a big mention to Lizzie, who's doing the socials for us at the moment. Remember that we do have a range of shows throughout the week, including our women's football podcast in midweek. Adam, just very, very quickly, there's a big match going on to report on this week, isn't there?
Oh, just a bit. Forest versus Derby ladies in a absolutely monumental clash.
And yes, so by the time you hear this podcast, that match will have taken place and we will be reporting on it in midweek. We'll also have our Friday 5 news roundup, and of course we'll have a report on the Palace match as soon as we can after the game. Until then, thank you for joining us, listener. Remember, you can find all of our links on socials and where to find our podcast at 1865.football. And come on, you Reds!
We won the PGMOL, let the VAR is salute and fan for the game, but they didn't change him. Oh, our patience has been tested multiple times. Oh, and NFC will now consider its options. Oh, won the PGMOL, let the VAR is salute and fan for the game, but they didn't change him. Our patience has been tested multiple times. Oh, and NFC will now consider its options. For PGMOL, VAR is a million fan before the game, but didn't change him. Our patience has been tested multiple times, and the FFC will not consider its options.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.